All right, welcome to the Explainer. Today, we're going to pull apart the very idea of expertise. We're going to explore how the greatest minds aren't just born that way. They're built piece by piece. So, let's get into it.
This is such a core question, right? It really shapes how we think about our own potential, our own limits. I mean, we all love the story of the natural genius, that prodigy who just gets it? But the actual science behind high performance, it tells a completely different and, frankly, a much more exciting story. Okay, so first things first, let's just completely demolish this myth of innate talent. It's not just a hunch. We're talking decades of research on the absolute top performers. Chess grandmasters, world-class surgeons, you name it. And they all point to the very same conclusion. Excellence is not a gift you're given. It's a structure that you build.
So, if expertise isn't a gift, it's got to be something we construct. And any construction project needs a blueprint. In the world of building skills, that blueprint has a very specific name. It's called deliberate practice.
Now, this is absolutely the key idea here. Think about it. You can play golf every weekend for 20 years and not really get better. That's just play. You can do your job for 20 years and kind of plateau. That's just work. Deliberate practice is different. It's that focused, sometimes uncomfortable effort where you are actively, systematically trying to get better. It explains exactly why just putting in the hours doesn't make you an expert. So what does this actually look like? Well, it breaks down into these 4 non-negotiable parts. First, you have to be in the Goldilocks zone, that sweet spot just beyond your comfort zone where things are hard but not impossible. Second, you need immediate feedback so you can fix mistakes on the fly. Third, you've got to deconstruct the skill, breaking it down into tiny, manageable pieces. And finally, tons of repetition on those specific pieces. These aren't just nice ideas. They're basically the laws of physics for skill acquisition. I love this quote. It just nails the point, doesn't it? Just being around something, being exposed to it, isn't enough. You could manage a team for 30 years and never really get better if you're not deliberately practicing, getting feedback, and pushing yourself. You can't just live in the cave. You have to actively study the rocks. And get this, that's the shocking reality for most of us. 0. That's how much time the average manager spends systematically building their skills. We have the blueprint, but for some reason, we're not using it. And a big part of the problem is that we're often trying to build with faulty materials. And when it comes to thinking, those materials are mental models of the world. Okay, so that takes us from the how we learn to the what we're learning with. To really think clearly, we first have to get our heads around the relationship between our ideas about the world and, well, the world itself. Okay, seriously, this next idea, it might be one of the most powerful things you ever learn about thinking. The map is not the territory. It means that any model, any theory, any belief you hold in your head is just a simplified representation of an infinitely complex reality. A map of New York is not New York. It doesn't have the smells, the sounds, the traffic. And the danger is we constantly mistake our simple maps for the real thing. So to be a good map reader, you kind of have to follow a few rules. First, if your map says there's a bridge, but you get to the river and it's gone, trust the river, not the map. Reality always wins. Second, always ask who drew this map. Every map leaves stuff out, and it reflects the biases of the person who made it. And third, and this is a tricky one, remember that in human systems, like the stock market, a map, say a big prediction, can actually change the territory it's describing. But here's the catch, and it's a big one. Even if you have the best blueprint for building skills and the most accurate maps of reality you can find, the whole structure can still come crumbling down from the inside. And why is that? Because the architect, your own brain, is full of hidden bugs and blind spots. And we're not talking about random slip-ups here. These are cognitive biases. They're systematic, predictable patterns of irrational thinking that affect every single one of us. And the driving force behind a lot of these errors comes down to which of 2 very different mindsets we choose to adopt when we face new information. What I find so fascinating about this is that it shows thinking isn't just about being smart, it's about what motivates you. The soldier is all about defense, protecting what they already believe. The scout, on the other hand, is driven by curiosity. Their goal is to see the landscape as clearly as possible. It's not about IQ, it's about your fundamental goal when you think. Okay, so this is all great in theory, but how do we actually do it? How do we build up our defenses and try to be more of a scout? Well, it's not enough to just know about these biases. We need a practical toolkit full of counterintuitive strategies to fight back. So our default setting, right, is to think forwards. We ask, what steps should I take to succeed? But a really powerful tool called Inversion flips that completely on its head. It asks the opposite question. What are all the things I could do that would absolutely guarantee this project fails? It's like, instead of figuring out how to win the game, you first figure out all the ways you could possibly lose, and then you just don't do those things.
And that question is the heart of a powerful exercise called a premortem. It's inversion in action. You get your team in a room and say, okay, the project is dead. It was a disaster. Now tell me the story of how it happened. By assuming failure from the start, you give everyone permission to voice the hidden risks and doubts that normal optimism just steamrolls over. You kill the project in your imagination so you can save it in real life.
Now, here's another tool that's going to feel completely backward at first. We're always told, think outside the box, right? Well, this method argues for the exact opposite. It says true innovation doesn't come from total freedom, but from extreme constraints. It forces you to be creative by thinking inside the box.
The classic story here is the Sony Walkman. It's a perfect example. The engineers started with a portable tape recorder. They identified what seemed like a totally essential feature, the record button. And then they just took it out. They subtracted it. And what were they left with? A small, high-quality device for personal listening. They didn't add anything. They took something away and created an entire new product category that changed how we listen to music forever.
All right, so let's pull all these threads together. We've got the blueprint for practice, the rules for making good mental maps, and a toolkit for thinking clearly. But the final crucial piece of this whole architecture is to challenge our very definition of what knowledge even means. So many of us fall into this trap. We think our brain is like a library or a hard drive, and our job is to just collect and store facts. We read a headline and think we understand the issue. But this is a fallacy. Real knowledge isn't a noun, something you have. It's a verb. It's something you do. This quote from Laurencio just nails it. Knowing is an active, dynamic process. It's that friction, that active engagement when you take a piece of information and you wrestle with it. You apply deliberate practice to it. You test it against your maps. You see where it breaks. It requires that scout mindset, that deep curiosity.
And really, that's the whole point. Building the architecture of expertise isn't about collecting a big pile of answers and putting them on a shelf in your mental library. It's about building a laboratory inside your mind, a place where you are constantly running experiments, testing ideas, practicing skills, and building better and better maps of the world. So the only question left is, what experiment are you going to run today?